What's going on today, Internet? Selfish here with Retrospect. Finding the perfect pocketable handheld has been nearly impossible until now. Today we're going to take a look at the Retroid Flip 2, and we're going to dive into its build quality, performance, emulation power, and a few other things nobody else is talking about, so you know exactly if it's worth your money or not by the time we're done with this video. The Retroid Pocket Flip 2 changes everything for mobile gaming. I know it seems like a stretch, but I'm going to show you why. Let's take a look. Alright, we're going to do a quick unboxing here. Retroid is amazing at their boxing because they're very simple and they use magnets. Love me some magnets. I think it makes the boxes more premium, even though it really doesn't change anything. This does come in multiple colors. We are going to look at the GameCube color here. And here we go. Oh, the little flippy thing flipped up with it. Well, that's what the Retroid Pocket 2 looks like when you take it out of the package. Just like that right there, at least the top of it does. We are going to move this to the side here real quick. Only a couple things here in the box. We do have a USB A to C charger, which is nice to have. This particular handheld does offer 27-watt charging, so this will be good. Now, if you do get the D1100 version, so I am actually looking at the Snapdragon 865 version. If you go with the D1100 version, it still does 18-watt charging, so not the worst case. And then we also do have a quality inspection sticker, and it did pass. Crazy. And we have our handheld. Also, on the back of this, you do have a spec sheet, so if you want to zoom in on that, otherwise I will throw the specs up here on the screen for you here in just a minute when we're going through the I/O. And we are going to take this out of the package. I'm really digging this GameCube colorway that we got going on here. So on the outside, it's pretty much a simple purple and gray, or indigo and gray, even though indigo is technically blue. Everybody calls this purple color indigo. Same with the Odin 2 Portal, call it indigo. And then on the inside here, we do have that traditional yellow joystick on the right, and then our buttons are colored like the GameCube. All right, now we're going to go through the I/O of the device here real quick with my little handy helper, and we're going to start at the top like we always do. We do have our shoulder and trigger buttons. They both are very nice. The triggers feel good when you push them down, and these shoulders are nice and clicky. There's also the exhaust vent here for the intake. On the back here, we do have the intake vent and a couple of cool lines here on the device. Not really sure what those are for, except for maybe to add some aesthetic to it so it's not so flat, and then your Retroid logo, but that is your vent for your intake. Your fan is sitting right there. On the left-hand side, we have nothing. On the right-hand side, we do have our volume up and down, which is nice. On the front here, we do have our TF or SD card slot. We also do have a Type-C hole here, which also does display out, and we do have a 3.5mm hole for headphones. On the top here, we just have a cool design. I'm going to talk to you about what that is later because I know everybody's been trying to figure this out, so we'll take a stab at that here in just a minute. Inside here, we do have our 5.5-inch AMOLED display that does play at 1080p. We do have front-facing speakers right here that come right towards the palms of your hands, sort of, and we'll look at that. We also do have Hall effect joysticks, start, select, home, our power button, and then we do have our D-pad, which is a pretty solid D-pad. It reminds me of pretty much all of the Retroid D-pads. It's got a decent pivot to it. It's pretty good for how flat it needs to be in order to fit inside of here without actually making it concaved, which is kind of nice. And then we do have our face buttons, which are pretty smooth. They don't have a ton of travel, which you wouldn't expect in a flat handheld like this because of being able to close the screen, but they do work well, and they feel pretty much like every other Retroid face button, at least off like the RP5 and stuff like that. Some of the things that are making this handheld kind of unique now that we've gone through the I/O are going to be its Snapdragon 865 CPU, which is kind of an older CPU, but with a little bit of help from some Adreno drivers, this thing does phenomenal in today's gaming space. We also do have 8 gigabytes of RAM, a 5.5-inch AMOLED display like we just discussed, and it looks great. It's the same display out of the RP5, and it does have great battery life for this 5,000 milliamp battery. Some of the biggest changes from the RP5 are obviously just the flip. It's got a more flat design as well. It's not nearly as ergonomic, but it does have this hinge here that allows it to close, making it far more pocketable than the RP5, and honestly, in some cases, almost easier to use because it's not quite so wide. And thanks to the RP5 coming out before it, we do already have a lot of enhancements that we can use on this device, so we're coming out of the gate running this time. Not to say that we weren't with the Retroid Pocket 5, but the Retroid Pocket Flip 2 definitely has an advantage in this space, thanks to the building blocks that have already been put in place for it. When it comes to build quality, I actually think that the Retroid Pocket Flip 2 is actually pretty good, so I understand why people think it maybe feels like a toy, and I think that maybe some of the pre-production models actually probably felt a little bit more toy-like. I know in my experience, just with pre-production models, it tend to feel a little bit more toy-like because they're not using the final plastics and things like that. This one here feels like any other Retroid Pocket device. So it is a toy, for one, but it doesn't feel cheap by any means. At least not to me. I don't think it feels cheap. Granted, I do look at a lot of $30 handhelds on this channel, so maybe that's why. I mean, anything's maybe a step up in that direction, but I do think it feels pretty quality, and I'm a huge fan of the original Retroid Pocket Flip, and I think they feel relatively close in build quality if this one doesn't even feel just a little bit better. And that you would think maybe because not translucent colors, but translucent colors actually tend to be stronger because they need to be in order to be translucent. So I think they did actually pretty good here. I don't have any complaints about it. I do have a couple complaints about some design choices that were made on on here, and we'll take a look at one of them right now. Everybody's been complaining about this logo here on the top of the Retroid Pocket Flip 2 because it doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't meet anything else with Retroid. I beg to differ. This logo here is specifically, it's actually like an incognito stealth Pac-Man logo, whether you want to say it's fossilized or whether you want to say he's just stealthy, but that is definitely Pac-Man. It is a 1-to-1 ratio. I'm going to show you right now. If you overlay the Pac-Man logo on top of it, you actually do get Pac-Man. I think that somebody was making the Pac-Man logo, or they just cut 1/4 out of it, because I think that's how it's all set up. But whatever, I think it's a Pac-Man logo. Prove me wrong, because nobody seems to have an idea why this is on here, or it's just a great spot to put a sticker, but I don't think they would have left this open here, so that's a Pac-Man logo. Now your weight and everything else here is pretty good. Again, back into this, but you do have a good hinge. I have just been doing nothing but playing with this hinge for the last almost week now, and it has been phenomenal. I haven't seen any kind of fractures, tears, or anything like that. I'll show you a little clip here. I actually had my daughter put it through its paces. She gave it the old drop test, and nothing seemed to happen to the screen or anything like that. And she also decided, you know what, let's see how durable this is if you try to give it a crush test. I've never done a crush test on a device before, but since she decided to get involved in the project, as a 1-year-old, she thought that it would be good to see if it could get crushed. And as a parent, I'm glad to know that it's going to be okay if my kids get a hold of it and decide to do whatever it is that she's trying to do to this thing. But let's take a look at another thing here too. I'm kind of curious about weight, and I want to see how this compares to the original Retroid Pocket Flip. They are both made to go into your pocket, and I think the design of these actually makes them very pocketable. Granted, I think the original Pocket Flip might be more pocketable because of its size. You're also sacrificing that monstrous AMOLED screen, and you're also going to Mordia style thumbsticks, which I actually really like on the original Retroid. It's kind of weird that they work so well, and they do actually click, which is odd. But on here, you know, we do get the bigger thumbsticks. So let's take a look and see what the weight difference is. Let's start by looking at a couple of classic devices that a lot of us have had. If you're just getting into the retro space and maybe you just had these growing up, this is the DSi XL, and it's a little dusty, but we can dust her off. And we're going to look in here and just kind of see what this weighs, because this one always seems a little heavy to me. So that's coming in at 328 grams. Then you have the 3DS XL, and this is not the new one. This is the original 3DS XL, because I'm OG like that, and that's coming in at 342 grams. So a little bit heavier yet. Now we have the original Retroid Pocket Flip, and the reason why I'm doing this is these are all flips, obviously made to go in your pocket. We have the original Retroid Pocket Flip. I think this one will be a little bit lighter. Yep, coming in at 278 grams. Let's see how that compares to the Retroid Pocket Flip 2, and that obviously is a little bit heavier, so that is at 309 grams. And you know, part of that is obviously we do have a bigger screen, we also do have fuller sticks, things like that, so we are going to add a little bit more weight, which I assumed it did. Proportionately though, they feel pretty well, they're pretty well balanced, but it obviously is a little bit heavier, but yet still lighter than some of the original DS systems from Nintendo. So if you think about it that way, we're actually getting a lot more with a considerable amount less weight, which is kind of impressive. Granted, we don't have a second screen, which is probably where they're picking up a lot of weight there. The screens aren't overly heavy, but there are the components that go with them as well, so there's a few things in there that obviously are going to make those a little bit heavier. But overall, I think the build quality is pretty good. These speakers are not fantastic. I do believe that there is actually an application out there to make them better. We'll address that in another video. I didn't want to do anything like that for this video. It's kind of a first look video, kind of I've been playing with it for about a week now kind of video. But I do want to address this because they don't sound, they're missing the mids, it seems like. It seems like you can get some decent highs, I guess kind of lows, but it's kind of missing something in the middle. I wouldn't even want to say it's missing the mids. It's almost missing like in between the mids and the highs. And it really doesn't have any lows, which sounds really weird. So I guess maybe it just has mids, but they're falling flat still. So it's not super impressive, and we'll take a look at it here. I'll show you the audio here when we get into some gameplay, and I think you'll be able to hear what I'm talking about. The other thing is these sticks obviously aren't going to be very big, but they do have good movability in here. You do have a good range of motion for how small they are, and they are your traditional Retroid style sticks. I think they just have a shorter post on them, if I'm not mistaken. That seems to be what it is. The other thing that's kind of interesting is how loud the fan is on here. So it's not as loud as the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. The Retroid Pocket 4s were absolutely obnoxious. It sounded like an airplane taking off. Let's see if we can crank this fan up. So this one's loud, but it's not airplane taking off loud. Now, I keep mine typically on smart, so it's only going to run when it needs to, and it doesn't tend to run at full speed like that. So I rarely actually notice it myself. I know some people have complained about that. It's not something that has been bothering me, and the Retroid Pocket 4 and 4 Pro really irritated me. I don't know if it's just because it doesn't kick in as often, but this fan doesn't seem to be bothering me so much in comparison to those. And the last thing I want to take a look at with the body that is a little bit obnoxious, other than the fact that the volume buttons are way too small for how big of a space they have, is how the shoulders and triggers lay out. The triggers on the Retroid Pocket Flip, the original one, come around the edges a little bit, which actually, how they're rounded, makes it easier to hit them, and you don't have a problem hitting them because of the way they're rounded out. Where here, because of the way they are, you almost have to lay your fingers more flat into the back, which is fine once you get used to it, but it is a change. It does take some time to figure out that you aren't actually going to be able to kind of hit them from the side like you could with the original Retroid Pocket Flip. So if you have an original Flip and you're looking at going to the Flip 2, it does take some adjusting, but it's not that bad. I've definitely had worse adjustment periods than that. Then you also have this other thing where I actually like to play the Retroid Pocket Flip 2 as like a vertical handheld. I tend to play it with it open all of the way, which is something we couldn't do on the original Flip, but this is just like a wide vertical. It reminds me of like the Game MT E5, where that was a 5-inch screen, so just take off half an inch, and that's pretty much what you have with the E5, where it's just this massive vertical handheld. So it really is pretty close to that, and this is actually pretty comfortable, to be honest with you, for how crazy it looks, but I do like to play the Flip 2 similar to that as a vertical, but it is very hard to hit the shoulder buttons because they are very thin and they do not have a ton of space here between the shoulder button and the lid of the device. There's very little space, so your fingers the whole time are actually rubbing on the lid, and it actually forces you onto the triggers every once in a while, which is kind of annoying, to be honest. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes you will hit that trigger when you don't want to because of that. And last but not least, we are missing the M1 and M2 button, which is unfortunate. Neither of these have a back button, which is fine. We can set other hotkeys or whatever, but having the M1 and M2 here on the original Flip did give us the ability to set those as our back or hotkeys for anything that we wanted. They are hard to hit though, to be honest with you. If you're playing, you are going to hit your triggers and your bumpers, so they are really made to be more of a hotkey, where on here it would be the same problem, but they just don't exist. And without having a back button on this handheld, it would be nice to have the M buttons or some other option there. There's so much space here, I don't know why that it had to be set up the way it is. Also, why is the home button so tiny in comparison to the power button? It doesn't make sense. And why is the power button inside? It took me a while to figure out how to turn this on when I first got it, because I was like, where's the power button? Like, I didn't expect it to be on the inside, and maybe that's because there's never been a clamshell where the power button's on the inside. They're always on the outside of the devices, so it's just been kind of a thing. And lastly, when it comes to the body, and I know it sounds like I'm complaining, but actually most of the stuff is just nitpicking. It's really hard to get this card slot open, and once you do, it is difficult to get the card in and out because it is inset so far. I'm gonna tell you what, this is a lot easier than the AMOLED Pocket Micro. That one is extremely difficult. Now this one's definitely not easy at all. You either have to have fingernails or poke something in there to get the card in and out. Not the worst thing, because once you have it in there, you really don't need to take it out, unless maybe you are doing some Linux gaming, but we'll address that here in a little bit. I might have a solution for that as well, so you don't need to take the card out. I'm working on something there, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But now that we kind of went through the body here and the shell and everything, I mean, I think that it's still pretty comfortable. It's not very ergonomic, to be honest. I'm not a person to put ergonomic grips on. I tried that with Retroid Pocket 4. I just didn't like the grips on there. It just added too much to the device. I did put a TPU case on my Odin 2 Portal, but that was just because it was recommended before, and I actually had never used it without it till recently. I took it out of it, and I don't know if I actually needed it. I guess it probably really depends on how long you're gonna play with the device, but I think that I play this for a few hours at a time, and I've been fine with it. It's just, but again, I want to play it with it flat like this, and it does hold fairly well. You can get pretty far before it starts to tip over. Maybe I can do it from the side, but so it does get a ways out before it tips. But if you are laying in bed and trying to play up like this, then all of a sudden it's not facing where you want it to, and it really is made to be able to be at this angle to play like this right here, which is fine. It works really well right here. And it's the same angle as the previous version, pretty much the same as the Nintendo's systems as well, kind of that angle. I wish there was some more options in between there, but there's not. I have seen people comparing this hinge to, thinking that like this hinge seems weak. I'd say in comparison to some of these Nintendo hinges that like do all this weird clicky stuff that like the Flip does, these to me feel more dangerous. They feel like they're going to break a little bit easier, and every Nintendo system does it, which I'm sure is why Neo did it with the Pocket Flip. Now you do have multiple locking spaces on here, obviously, with this one, but you still kind of do run into that issue of it falling. Now, not when it's like this, but you do when it's all the way up, it will actually fall down while you're playing. Maybe not quite as easily, but it does do it pretty easily. So it's kind of the same thing we got going on here. And then one last thing with this fan here, it does seem to actually work, which it didn't really do anything in the original Retroid Pocket Flip. In fact, people were drilling them out and doing all kinds of weird stuff. I found out that if you poke it, it falls out because they're actually not attached. They're just pushed in to where they are right now. So you can actually pop them out of the original one. Not gonna be a problem here. And there's gonna be no amount of drilling or anything you need to do to make them work. They really didn't have any effect on the original Retroid Pocket Flip, but they didn't really need it on that one in comparison to this. With the Snapdragon processor, it does tend to get a little bit warmer, but you aren't really going to notice it. And one really good thing about this design is that your processors, it must be in the middle. This is where it tends to get the warmest, but you don't notice the heat at all. And the reason being is your hands are pulled away from the center of this device, and having the CPU and the screen separated also probably helps, but having your hands separated from that center area, I know we all want to have a screen there, but one advantage of having nothing there is that it gives you a good place to dissipate the heat. so no complaints there. Now, obviously, this is a little bit bigger than the original Retroid Pocket Flip, which is one of my favorite of all-time handhelds, and part of me really wishes that this was just an upgraded version of the original, though I do understand some of the design choices here. Still not this, I don't understand this design choice, but I do understand some of the design choices here and why they went the way they did, and this has a beautiful screen, and it really is just a pocketable Retroid Pocket 5, which is awesome. I mean, really, that's what we needed. This is one of the most pocketable, higher-end handhelds that we have. I don't want to call it a high-end handheld because it obviously isn't the highest-end handheld. I don't know if it's going to replace my Odin 2 Mini. Probably is, just because it is a little bit more portable. And right now, my Odin 2 Mini really is my device to play on the go. But you also do have to worry about breaking sticks off and all kinds of stuff, having the screen exposed when it's on the go. So, like, you have to have your screen cover. I'm guessing heavier than the Flip 2. I'm not going to pull the scale back out, but I love this handheld, and it's a little bit more powerful. So there is that as well. But when I'm on the go, I do want to do some just quick hits in and out of games. And since the screen does turn itself off, I can be playing even like a PS2 game and just flip the screen shut. And yeah, I'm like, wait, the battery does not diminish as fast as I actually expected it to. And I've done a little bit of battery testing, but I can make it pretty much through an entire day with this battery playing higher end 3D games. If I'm playing nonstop PS2 or GameCube, then I do find myself in a position where I am going to have to charge it throughout the day. But I haven't charged this since yesterday, and we're still at 67%. I think that we're doing pretty good, and I played for about an hour and a half this morning on PS2, so I think the battery has plenty of juice in it, which makes it also good for pocketability because you don't have to worry about bringing a charger with you. And if you really are worried on the go about your battery life, you can always emulate some lower end systems or do some game streaming if you have access to the internet. Now that we have all that out of the way, we're going to do a little bit of game testing. I'm not going to do any low end emulation. I think everybody knows it's going to work on here, and I think there's plenty of Retroid Pocket 5 videos out there of people emulating on these devices to begin with, though I do have some ideas for some future videos that I haven't seen yet. But I'm just going to touch on a couple of games in the emulation space, just to give you a feel for it if you're new to the space and you want to know what these can do. It'll be pretty quick, but just some light gameplay footage for you here. So let's take a look. So that gives you a basic idea of what this is pretty much capable of. We can actually push it a little bit harder than this. We can actually emulate some more Switch on here than what has been showcased by anybody, I think, in the past, and we'll take a look at that in a future video. Obviously, native Android games are going to work great on here. You can play your Genshin Impacts and your Call of Duties and things like that, and they do work well. In some cases, you can even play on higher end settings, which is pretty cool. It is a mid-level Android device, and it does well as a mid-level device. Much better than anybody expected. I didn't think it made any sense to put this older chip in here because, like, I had the Odin 1 Pro that had a Snapdragon 845 in it. You know, you can still do stuff with that SoC today. The original Odin 1 still work really well, but it is starting to get a little bit tired. So when they went with the Snapdragon 865 on here, I was a little skeptical. I'm not going to lie. We're seeing some significant improvements over the original Odin 1 Pro. So I think that we have something good there. And you don't see a ton of throttling, and you can actually adjust everything to make your games A, playable, B, look better in most instances, even with 3D gaming and PS2 and GameCube. That's really where this shines, is your PS2 and GameCube for sure, but you do have those abilities to play other emulation. If you like what you're seeing here so far, do us both a favor, hit that subscribe button so you can get more content like this in the future, and it also puts a smile on my face. All right, so now that I tore this whole thing apart, we went through everything. I want to go through the pros and cons of the device before I kind of give you my verdict on it, but let's talk about this real quick. So this has great pocketability. This does slide in and out of your pocket just fine. They did a really good job too of making it so that these trigger buttons do not get hooked on your pocket, which I think is part of why they didn't wrap around the edges on this one, unfortunately, as far as the triggers went, but it would have been nice to have seen the triggers and the bumpers be in the same spot. But yes, pocketability is definitely there. This does have solid gaming performance in comparison to a lot of the Android handhelds out there, and with the ability to use the Adreno drivers, it really ups its game. That's going to help you with things like PS Vita if you want to get into Wii U emulation, which is pretty new, so it's definitely in its infancy, and then PS3, which is also pretty much brand new, but they do also offer Adreno drivers for those. And then if you do decide you want to do Nintendo Switch, that's what's going to make Nintendo Switch work on here. So it does have good, solid gaming performance, and it does have the ability to expand with the emulators as the emulators themselves begin to grow. I love the flip design. I think it's awesome. If you have ADHD like me, you might find yourself using it like a fidget spinner, but it seems to work pretty good, and I don't have any problems with it even after flipping it open and closed all day long. Also, the ability with that flip design just to be able to jump into a game right away, have it on, and then just close the device and walk away, and then open it again to be back in the same spot, I think is pretty phenomenal. And I think it's an underrated feature, and you just don't get that without the flip designs. Sure, you can turn systems on and off, but there's another thing when you're sitting here playing, and just so people in the room know that you're not ignoring them. If somebody's having a conversation, you can literally just be like, all right, let's talk, and you don't lose anything. Your progress is going to be exactly where you were. So I think there is definitely a benefit just in that alone, but there's obviously some more benefits as well. And I think it's priced really well. You know, in that $200 range, I think you're getting a really good bang for your buck here because it does do really good emulation. I still think it would have been nice to have seen a more powerful SoC in here, especially with some of the mobile SoCs that Snapdragon has just recently released, but that wouldn't have given them the ability to had built this out in the Retroid Pocket 5 when they did, because in the 5, that came out before those SoCs did. So sticking with this SoC, knowing that it's tried and true, knowing that we do already have a lot of tools built around the Retroid Pocket 5 that will work on the Retroid Pocket Flip, I think was probably a good move to make. And it's going to last a few years. I think that was very well, and with the price point, I think that fits into that very well too. It's actually priced pretty low for a device that can do as much as it can and does have the ability to expand going forward. So I think it's a well done move on the part of Retroid. Now, a couple of the cons here, like I said before, the controls can be a little cramped in your hands because it's not very ergonomic. You are kind of trying to figure out exactly where you're going to be comfortable. Now, I think they did make the right move by putting at least the left stick on top. They could have gone either way with the right stick, but the left stick on top, because this is a 3D game-based device for the most part. You don't put this kind of power in here and expect to play a lot of 2D games. I mean, you can, but with this AMOLED display and with the processor, you can take advantage of 3D gaming. And with that, I think you do need at least the left stick on the top. So I think they did good with that. This is set up really for racing and first-person shooters, and it works great for those things just because you have really quick reaction between your sticks and your fingers that are either on your triggers or on the shoulder buttons. Another con is the fact that it is Android. Why I'm saying that is it's not because you get the ability to actually access a lot more stuff sometimes with Android. It's just the setup time. It takes forever to set up an Android device, and they do have their own front end, and they do have their own emulators on here where you can try to do a faster setup process. The problem is all the emulators are already outdated by the time you get it because they get updated all the time. So they're going to be outdated, and then you're going to run into this problem where Google Play is going to want to try to update them, but it can't because it doesn't recognize the version. Dolphin specifically, you're going to get an error that'll tell you that you cannot update your Dolphin emulator. I've done it on Retroid devices before. It drove me nuts. I prefer not to install any of their stuff on here because of that reason, but you can make that choice on your own when you go through the setup process. I would recommend, though, just going and getting your own emulators. Now, this is going to add to your setup time, so you are going to have to wait longer to play games, but in the end, I think that you're going to be happier, and since you're going to have this for a long time, you want to make sure it's set up the way you want it and it's set up correctly so you're not running into issues. I am really still missing also those M buttons here here on the back, as well as a back button. I think that we could have had one, the other, or both. We got plenty of room for all of them, so I don't know why they made that decision to take these out. I don't know if people weren't using them. I know they had programming issues with them when the original Flip originally came out. They did fix that in a software update, and they worked just fine after that. So I'm not sure why they decided not to put them on here. Maybe they were just kind of hesitant after the first time, but I really wish they would have, because I use those buttons all the time, or some kind of equivalent that we could use for a hotkey would have been really nice on here. And lastly, it is kind of still limited to some of its high-end 3D gaming. Sure, you can use Game Hub and do some kind of Steam gaming on here as well through things like WinLater, which has been updated now to not include a virus, which is a whole different conversation. But you can use things on here like WinLater with Steam and stuff like that, or you can use WinLater through GitHub, and you can play some of those games. It's not going to play your high-end AAA games. Unfortunately, you do get a lot more performance out of something like an Odin 2, where with that Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 that's in there, you are going to get significantly higher performance. It's just not going to be here, but also you're also saving over $100 on the device, and that's where your price difference is going to come in. So the advantage is you do get a really good, pocketable, solid device that you don't have to worry about not being able to expand with the market. It's there. It's going to be able to expand with the market, but it's just not going to play that super high-end gaming stuff. I am interested to see where this fits in with Wii U and PS3 as that emulation matures. I'm not sure how well it's going to emulate those, but we will find out. It does seem to do pretty well with PS Vita, which maybe we'll do a demo on that in another video. This video wasn't sponsored and this was not provided to me, but if you do want to get one of these, I do have a link to Retroid down on my thingamabob. This might not age well, but hopefully it holds true. Retroid right now is not instilling tariffs on US customers if they want to purchase one of these. They did up their shipping by $20 just because they had to go through a different shipping company, but they are eating the cost of tariffs as of the publishing of this video. That might not always be the case, but this company is the first company to come out and really stand behind their customers, and that's why I'm really excited to show this to you and showcase it and talk about their devices right now. Sure, they've had their flaws in the past, but right now they're doing something that none of the other handheld companies are doing, which hopefully will help keep this hobby alive in the United States until everything gets figured out. Internationally, I think the hobby will do well, but the United States is a big purchaser of this, which does allow for a lot of the innovation of these devices because they do need that R&D money. And Retroid is so far not bending to the knee of all the nonsense, and they are just trying to get handhelds in the hands of their players, and I think that that is awesome. So there is a link down on my thingamabob if you do want to pick one of these up, or any of the last couple of Retroid devices that have come out here in like the last 6 months. There's links to all of them down on my thingamabob. Since I don't do memberships or anything at this point, that does help support the channel as well if you do purchase through there, so I really do appreciate it. Now in conclusion, I do think that this is a phenomenal device. If you're looking for a sleek and powerful handheld for retro gaming, some light Android gaming or light 3D emulation like that, by light I mean like PS2, GameCube, stuff like that, so not necessarily super light, the Retroid Pocket Flip 2 absolutely delivers on those things. So I personally don't have a problem recommending this. If somebody's looking for a handheld, this is an easy recommend for me. Now we don't know if there's going to be any issues with this hinge or anything. We haven't seen any yet. Hinge devices are just so picky, and even Nintendo's had issues with hinges over the years, so it's really kind of hit or miss on whether a company can get this right. They did have issues with the original Retroid Pocket Flip, but they did fix them, and they made good with the customers. So hopefully if there is anything here, they would do the same. But right now, all I'm seeing is good things here, and so yes, I can absolutely recommend this to somebody. But that's all I got for today. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, share this video with your friends, because sharing is caring. Also, sharing is actually the way we grow the channel the fastest. I don't know why that is, but we get the most subscribers off of shared videos. So share this video with as many people as you can, and hopefully they'll come and join our little family over here. And after you get done with all the paperwork that I just asked you to do, check out one of these videos that's up on the screen. Google picked it out for you. They know you better than you know you. So obviously you're going to want to watch it and see what it's all about. That's all I got for today. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.